let's begin by having everyone introduce themselves. We'll start with Bill because the audience is, of course, seeing you. Just give a quick reminder of what you do.
Sure. Bill Callahan. I'm the Director of Government and Strategic Affairs for Blockchain Intelligence Group. Prior to coming on to Blockchain Intelligence Group, I was the Special Agent in charge of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Our St. Louis division spent over 20 years with the DEA working narcotic money laundering investigations.
Got it. Shaun.
Hi, I'm Shaun MaGruder, founder and CEO of BlockTrace. We're a blockchain forensic and analytical services company. We pretty much started BlockTrace in 2018 to identify money laundering on various cryptocurrencies, to identify nefarious activity and those kinds of things. So we work with private companies. We work with users who've had their funds hacked, stolen. We've all heard of those stories, of course. And then we work with federal law enforcement agencies and different governments as well.
Great. Ian.
Thank you. So my name is Ian, and I'm proud to say I'm one of the founding members of Merkle Science, where I'm also one of the directors there. Before I joined Merkle Science, I started my career as a capital markets lawyer, so advising companies with the likes of IPOs. And naturally, in 2017, one of the questions that I constantly got asked was, is crypto a security? Right, which was what prompted me to start taking a look at the space. And fortunate enough to encounter the Merkle and Nirmal at Merkle Science, which combines my expertise in regulatory and my passion in blockchain.
Yeah. Tell the audience what Merkle Science does.
And Merkle Science, we are a next-generation predictive analytics platform that builds software around helping blockchain companies detect, investigate, and analyze risks associated with illicit transactions. So, like Shaun, we work with similar clients, cryptocurrency exchanges, custodians, wallets, as well as a suite of different financial institutions. And today we're very proud to say we have a couple of law enforcement regulators, and even you guys might be surprised to hear we have interest from insurance companies who want to access the kind of data that we have and use that for things around calculating premiums. So I think the market is really opening up, and we're very excited to be here.
Great. And earlier this year, your company added BSV support to its privacy.
Yes, so that's one of the things we're very happy to announce. This year, seeing the ecosystem at BSV grow, right? We've been getting a lot of demand from our clients in wanting to onboard this so that they can offer BSV on their platform in a safe and compliant manner. So earlier this year, we went live with BSV support. So anybody needs help on that front, please feel free to hit me up.
Great. Now, Richard.
I feel left out. It seems like they all met you before.
Yes, yes. Now, I don't want you to scare the audience, but tell everyone what you do.
My name is Richard Reinhardt. I'm a special agent with IRS criminal investigation, and I am the coordinator for the cyber crimes unit in the New York field office. I've been working money laundering investigations for the last 23 years.
Okay. And tell us about your involvement in just generally about blockchain investigations. We'll get to some more detail in a moment, but tell us generally, what's your experience in that field?
So it's no mystery to anybody, cryptocurrency is becoming popular with criminals. So where we get involved in that is more on the peer-to-peer side. Also, we're doing a lot of work with Bitcoin ATMs, trying to find bad guys using those. And I don't have any experience in it, but we have guys looking at ransomware cases, trying to track the payments for those, stuff of that nature.
All right, now to help us understand how these investigations happen, we have some screenshots that some of you have sent me. So we're going to start with this. Bill, why don't you explain for us briefly, again, what this shows and from your Clue product.
Sure, Jimmy. So Clue is our investigative software tool. It's used by law enforcement agencies, global agencies around the world, also used by private investigators as well, and some financial institutions. Basically, excuse me. This is just a quick graph here of the ransomware, of the Colonial Pipeline ransomware that you're all familiar with, happened a few weeks ago or months ago at this point. And we just kind of traced out the money for when it was seized. And something that we had brought to the attention of law enforcement. FBI always loves when I show this this slide in trainings because it shows their wallet, right? So there's information out there, it's all public, and that's a wake-up call that this information is public. We could trace it, so we're able to identify how the flow of the funds to when the FBI seized it and put it in their wallet, which makes law enforcement have to rethink how they are going to seize and store cryptocurrencies there.
So what we're seeing here is obviously these are wallet addresses with a date and timestamps, and you're tracking where the funds have gone, or even portions of them, because people, criminals will sometimes split, coins into multiple addresses.
Right, and this is a piece of it, about I think $4 million or so of the larger amounts. This is just a small snapshot of a piece of the transfers. You can see over on this side here, the dark side ransom group. When you see a circle, that's a wallet. And when you see a square, that's a transaction. That's what it goes through.
Okay.
And this is just something, it takes what's public. It would take weeks to do in Excel spreadsheets, and does this in less than a minute, 2 minutes, and puts this out. Behind it, we have a team that works intelligence. And we're always adding intelligence and giving attribution to these wallets if they belong to a ransomware, sextortion, drug trafficking, dark web, or what it may be. The dates and times and the amounts you see up here. The amounts are at the time of the event, not converted to any sort of fluctuation. That's what it was worth at the time of the event. The date is the date, and the time is in UTC. So it's just something sometimes we have to correct people when they look at the time.
Got it. And obviously this helps identify problematic addresses. Now, you talked about this other day, but why are you seeking digital love from a Polish influencer model at night, Bill?
Yeah, I didn't know this was beamed around the world, and got a lot of trouble for seeking out, if you were here the other day, digital love on the internet here. Yeah. That's what I'm allowed to do, is digital love. Now, this was for fun. This model here, this Polish model, had sold her love, her digital love, put it on for sale. And I believe the next slide I may have is the...
she tokenized her love?
She tokenized her digital love, put it on the Ethereum blockchain, and this is just to show. So we also graph out...
that was her first mistake, putting on the Ethereum blockchain.
Yeah, I don't know, that was the mistake. But somebody actually bought it. I think they paid, what was it, $250,000, $25,000, whatever it was. So somebody did.
So you can put a price on love.
You can put a price on digital love.
Okay, got it. All right.
I like this.
All right, interesting. So you traced this not because you had a business reason to, just because that's what you do at night.
I will leave it at just because. How about that, Jimmy?
All right. Awesome. Okay, let's talk about this. And for this, we're going to Ian. These are some graphics you provided to us from Merkle Science. Explain what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so, Bill, thank you for walking them through, what a crypto investigation looks like. I thought, for my slides, I'll probably take a step back and kind of talk a little bit about, what businesses can do to guard against, potential activity. So what you're looking at here actually is an investigation that we done on behalf of one of our clients, which was an exchange. So if you look at the yellow circle all the way on the right, that's actually the exchange that we were monitoring.
Okay, so that's the exchange, the little yellow dot there.
Yep, the little yellow dot. Yep. And all the other circles that you see over here are individual wallets, right? And what's really exciting about blockchain that's really changing the dynamics around compliance and investigation, I think it's about the fact that, for the first time, we have so much data. Right? We have so much visibility as to where these cryptocurrencies are coming from. We can see the entire life cycle of a wallet and monitor its behavior. Right? And so what you're seeing over here is a typical example of what happens if an exchange doesn't have adequate KYC and AML measures, right? Where, oftentimes today there's a couple of exchanges out there that say, if my client is transacting less than 2 BTC, for example, I can do away with KYC. And the unfortunate side effect of that is something like this, where, criminals today are realizing that, hey, crypto is basically programmable money. Right? If you tell me that I can only do less than 2 BTC in one account, well, I'll just write a script that basically moves my money through, like hundreds of different wallets and deposit it into each account less than 2 BTC in order to evade, right, the kind of thresholds that you have. Right? So it is important for businesses to recognize, these risks and be aware that, it is possible to utilize the data that blockchain provides in order to protect their business. Right? So this is what they're looking at over here. And then other things that we do over at Merkle Science is, of course, aside from just helping our clients visualize where these illicit funds are coming from, the great thing about blockchain is that you can then combine on-chain information with what we call off-chain information, right? Which is something that I think the guys over at BlockTrace does really, really well, right? And when we combine all this information, taking in things like IP addresses, right, we can then provide investigators with a lot more information that can help them then identify individuals. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And what is this?
And yeah, so just bear with me. So one of the things that we've been then working on is, in the early days when everybody was just using Bitcoin, transaction monitoring was relatively simple, right? It's just about where funds are coming from. Today, some of the new trends that we're seeing are the rise of DeFi and NFTs, and oftentimes these utilize smart contracts, right? And this makes investigations a lot more complex because now, in a single transaction, you may not necessarily just have one sender and one receiver, right? It could pass through a smart contract which routes throughout many different smart contracts, right? And so, yeah, we've been working on creating bespoke products to assist some of our NFT clients and DeFi platforms with investigations. And this is basically a visual of how we break apart that smart contract and let them know what's happening inside.
Yeah, because one of the things we've talked about on our earlier NFT sessions is how if you have an NFT platform that is user-generated, allowing users to automatically generate NFTs, you have to be wary about people doing so to essentially commit money laundering. Right?
Exactly. With all these smart contracts, the fact that they're not controlled by a central entity means that any transaction just automatically gets passed through. Right? And so the money laundering risk is very, very real. One of the things that we're realizing is oftentimes when we conduct investigations, we're just looking at a single address, right? Whereas the great thing about blockchain is we have the ability to do analysis on clusters and entities. So one of the recent things that we've launched is a way for regulators and financial institutions that we're working with to basically monitor the blockchain activity of their counterparties so that they can actually see in real time, right, if the partners that they're working with are receiving funds from potentially illicit sources. Yeah.
Got it. And this would be usable by like a virtual asset service provider, exchange,
yeah, so it could be used
wallets.
by, let's say, an exchange who wants to monitor the other exchanges that they deal with. Because if you're an exchange with strong KYC and AML, what you don't want to do is to then be dealing with an exchange with weak KYC and AML, right, who then launders funds and passes on that ill-gotten gains to you. So that's one use case. We have banks that want to use it to monitor exchanges that they want to onboard as clients, all the way down to regulators who want to use it to monitor the VASP that they have licensed in their jurisdiction.
Got it. Yeah. All right. Now let's go to BlockTrace.
All right, yeah, so basically, we work with, like I said already, on investigations and those kinds of things. But as Bill alluded to and Ian alluded to, there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes at these product-based companies. And, they focus on manual attribution of addresses and clusters and clustering algorithms and those kinds of things. And so we've built an API aggregation layer that talks to, companies like theirs. And so we've incorporated CipherTrace and Elliptic and soon hopefully a few others right here. And so, basically every company out there has different information about a given cluster. And sometimes, there are data gaps because, sometimes you just end up in a silo of data. And so, we've built applications around this layer we call Fusion. You can Google and find out information about it. But basically, this is one of our first applications that we've built. There are several other applications on this panel here, but you might not be huge fans of what we've done with this. So, so we'll just show this one here. But what this here is...
what are we seeing? I know you blurred out some things purposely.
Yeah, so we've built this application here for one of our customers. And, so essentially what we're highlighting here are high-risk transfers from darknet markets into exchanges located in the US and a couple other partnering countries.
And how do you know they're from darknet markets?
So by leveraging the data that comes back from Fusion. So we essentially, we're essentially doing compliance on an entire blockchain. You ask, for every input, for example, and output and those kinds of things, you want to identify who an address is. And so we'll send that request out to Fusion, and Fusion will relay it to some of the other API data providers, and they'll respond back with the data that they do have, the intelligence, so to speak. And so then we highlight it here in this dashboard. And so you're looking at the product of all of the different tool combiners, the data.
Right. All right, Richard, let's go to you. So can you walk us through, and it could be a hypothetical case, of what are the steps you take when you are investigating some suspicion of illicit activity on the blockchain?
Absolutely. I'm going to give it in its most simple form because there's a lot of legal stuff that happens along the way.
Yeah.
So it's not like we just go into your bank account and we can see anything we want. There's a lot that happens to get to that point.
Right.
But one example is I'll give you, we'll get information from an attorney's office. They do closings. their email was compromised and the wires were redirected. We'll follow that money into a bank account and then see how that individual used it. So I'll give you an example of a guy who was on Facebook advertising he buys and sells Bitcoin. We tracked one of these business email compromises to his account. So then we get the bank account, we analyze the deposits that look suspicious in there, and then we do some covert stuff to get to that guy. So whether it's sending a confidential informant or one of us to try and do business with that guy and engage them and try and get the wallet addresses. And then we'll use guys like these to help us track those wallets and get to the illegal activity.
Okay. And then I assume you're documenting, obviously.
Yes, everything's documented. Everything's done legally.
Because evidence, chain of evidence is necessary.
Yes.
Got it. Bill, obviously, while you were a DEA agent, were you having to deal with blockchain, investigations at the time, or was that just too early?
So when I first became a supervisor, it was right around the time of Silk Road. So at that time, it was very manual intensive. There weren't these kind of programs out there in the software. It was more, putting stuff into Excel spreadsheets, which took a long time. Over the years, we saw the peer-to-peer money launderer who was exchanging drug dollars for Bitcoin. Again, it was a lot of manual time of using Excel spreadsheets until some of these early on applications started to come out and we could use those.
Okay. Were you involved in any investigations related to Silk Road?
I was involved as from a supervisor. I became a supervisor,
Right.
and one of the jobs I had here was I oversaw our undercover bank accounts for our proactive money laundering operation. So I was involved with setting up payments and helping the agents be able to conduct. There's a bunch of different, all the agencies, different authorities that we have and don't have. So there's a lot of kind of paperwork and approval processes and explanations to get things done.
Would you give our audience understanding of what you view as the extent of particularly just drug-related crimes that use digital currencies? How big is this problem?
So it's a significant problem, and for those of you that were here on Tuesday and saw my presentation, look, I ended my presentation highlighting 93,000 overdose deaths in 2020. Right now, with the US, Canada, we have a crisis on our hands, and many of us in this room are probably affected and touched by it. Kids today have easily access of digital currency. They have access to the dark web, and they're purchasing these pills, counterfeit pills. And please go home, and if you have kids, talk to them. These are not real pills. I mean, they're being sold as oxys and whatnot, but they are counterfeit pills. They contain fentanyl, and they're deadly doses of fentanyl. And this is what's happening. I hear story after story from families there. And it's something that we want to protect all of us from. We want to protect this blockchain from allowing those criminals to come on to the BSV blockchain. I know Jimmy is a huge behind that and push behind that, wants them off, but that's going to take all of us to understand how they operate through training and education, through looking for these different wallets that are in contact with the dark market and getting it out to our customer base and saying, look guys, this is bad stuff out there. So it is out there. I can't say all 93,000 because I know they were sold on the streets of New York and St. Louis where I ended up my career, but a good portion of these pills are being sold on social media apps, on the dark market, and on the surface web, coded and whatnot, and that's something we need to be aware of.
Got it.
Just to
Richard,
piggyback on that
yes,
real quick,
please.
it is, like Bill's saying, a lot of this darknet activity is ending up at the Bitcoin ATMs, at the peer-to-peer exchanges. I just came back from a trip where we were getting cash in the mail and sending out Bitcoin, and it was $500,000, and that was only in 6 months, but it was all for fentanyl. So it's a major problem. And
what are the other major areas of criminal activity you're seeing are taking place on blockchains or distributed ledgers?
romance schemes are incredibly huge right now, and the elderly community is just, for whatever reason, they meet these people on Facebook, they make them believe they're a real person, and then all of a sudden their bank accounts are being used to move money.
Got it. Shaun, without obviously revealing some of who your clients are, what are the areas of criminal activity you're seeing most happening?
I would say there's still, I mean, if you go back to the previous slide here, I mean, here you saw, darknet market, money laundering, and so those were transfers all from Hydra Market into US-based exchanges and a few others. But, I think that they've already alluded that, you're seeing a lot of different types of schemes out there. You're seeing a lot of wallet hacks. I mean, I think everyone's paid attention to DeFi hacks and smart contract exploitation and those kinds of things. So those are all the different types of things that, we're all focused on, And so, other really big things, obviously you always have man-in-the-middle like attacks where, someone tries to unlock their wallet after X number of years and they download the latest Trezor software when in fact they've actually downloaded a Trojan backdoor, and then they insert their seed phrase, and then immediately after that programmatically their wallet is sweeped, right? And so then we have to step in, and I know these folks, everyone up here gets these leads in all the time, and so there's a lot of work that's required to trace and investigate these crimes.
So Richard, the U.S. government just, I think, about 2 days ago announced a whole, new sort of initiative instead of task force to really focus on cryptocurrency type enforcements. What do you think prompted that now, if you can disclose, and how much of that is tax collection related?
Well, I'm a money laundering guy, so I really don't work tax cases. So, I mean, there is a side where they are looking for tax evasion through the use of cryptocurrencies. I can't elaborate on that because I don't have experience in that. But it is a big initiative of ours to start investing money in cryptocurrency, working with guys like these to get the tools necessary to follow all this money.
All right. Ian, a lot of the people watching online, as well as some here in this room, run businesses in the BSV ecosystem, whether they're wallets or they may have applications, and some people here are involved with exchanges. Give us some advice, and I'll ask this to the whole panel. What can they be doing to better help stop criminal activity through their application services or just on the blockchain generally?
Well, first, I think a lot of the crime that happens in crypto, we kind of bracket into two types, right? There's the money laundering activity that you can guard against, but then oftentimes, a lot of the hacks that we come in on, exchange hacks, oftentimes we find that the point of failure is not actually related to the technology or the process, it's more human error, right? So the first advice that I give to businesses is first, make sure that your staff are trained, right? Trained with proper cybersecurity policies, right? Trained to do AML, and that's one very important piece. But moving beyond that, what you can do from a tech perspective is naturally, to start, speaking to, blockchain analytics providers, AML providers, where we come into the life cycle of our clients' workflow is we come in every time crypto is going into their business, and we come in every time that crypto is going out of their business, right? Which means that we guard against illicit funds coming in, and we guard against their clients sending funds to illicit actors, right? A lot of people forget that second portion, that monitoring isn't just about where money is coming from, it's about where money is going, right? And being able to use a provider that protects you from both sides means that, hey, even if you accidentally have illicit funds coming in, if you're able to detect that and you can block it from going out, you can then provide actionable intel to law enforcement, or best case scenario, you freeze the funds and you can actually help the victims recover that asset. Sad reality of the fact is more often than not, by the time these businesses realize that something is going on, it's too late. Money has gone in, money has gone out. The other thing that I'll say is, as a business, you do want to build close relationships with your regulators and law enforcement. Today, the scene is very different from what it was 2 to 3 years ago. Today, regulators and law enforcement agencies are more than happy to engage with the virtual asset providers in their jurisdiction. In fact, a lot of our clients have direct lines to the regulators, direct lines to the law enforcement agencies. Anytime something happens, they pick up the phone, they give it a call, because at the end of the day, cases like this, it is time sensitive, right? So developing that close relationship with your local authorities, I think, helps you not just from, in the event an incident happens, but helps you just build, a safer and more compliant business.
Bill, what advice would you give to the businesses here?
Well, to the businesses here, and to echo something Ian said, it was definitely reach out to those local entities in your jurisdictions there and educate them, because you're part of that. But I think it's recognizing, okay, that we all have a role to play. We all need to be educated. We can't stick our head in the sand because we're a gaming or gambling or we're something else. We're paying out money, right? And sometimes there's going to be some real monies that are paid out here. We need to look at ourselves. Are we a money service business? Do we need to think like that? But do we need to build into our ethos of our businesses, hey, we are building a safe system here, a safe blockchain, a safe business. and making that message clear. We don't want that activity. We don't want that nonsense here. We're going to report you right away. We're going to kick you off. We're going to do what we got to do. So, and that's part of training, because a lot of the great stuff I've been seeing here for the last couple of days and talking to people, the businesses, the entrepreneurial spirit is just off the chart. It's great. But you need to have that thought going somewhere in your executive office there, thinking, okay, there's some bad people out there. How do we keep them off? How do we send the message we don't want them on, and that we are not going to tolerate that?
Yeah. So even if you're not really a money services business, a lot of applications here in our world need to start thinking to act like one, at least when it comes to sort of compliance and safeguarding against how some user might abuse your platform and system for illicit activities. Like thinking like one, even if you're not regulated as one.
Right.
Yeah. Shaun, what advice would you give?
I would say for money services businesses, integrating the APIs for the different providers is always really helpful, because it allows you to, peek into those data gaps, and it allows you to risk score your customers a little better, a lot better actually. And when you're able to identify the point of origin for crypto, whether it be multiple hops or single hop, for example, which has the ability to affect the risk score for a given customer. Being able to monitor that across the entire platform is incredibly important, and then being proactive to disable accounts is really, really big too. So there are some exchanges out there that have not done that, and we see that because the same exact deposit address is used 30, 40, 50 times, and if we're able to detect it, then they should be able to detect it, right? So why is this one deposit address at your exchange continuing to receive, cryptocurrencies from, Hydra Market, for example? And so, like I said, if we can see multiple deposits, then you ought to be able to as well. So, and by you, of course, I don't mean you, but money services businesses specifically.
Richard, what advice would you give to the businesses building on our blockchain to, help curb the ability for, bad people to use their platforms for illicit activity? And also, secondly, if something bad does happen, what can they do that will help your job?
Well, I think, like these guys said, I mean, you gotta know your customer, right? But the difficult line that we have there is people are using Bitcoin because they don't want anybody to know them, right? So for us, it's kind of difficult because we can't go up to the illegal MSB guy and say, well, if you just start collecting ID, this isn't going to happen anymore, right? So but you have to know your customer, because you can't use it as an excuse. You can't say, oh, I didn't know he was from the dark web or something. I mean, after a certain point, you have to use your head and know something's not kosher, right? What was the second part of that question?
And if there is suspicion or an event of something illicit happening, how can a virtual asset service provider, wallet provider, one of the applications that is having money being sent in and out of their platform, what can they do in those moments to
at a minimum,
make your
I'd
job
call
easier?
your local authorities, but the FBI has a hotline that you can call in cyber tips too. And I would report it, and somebody will answer you.
Got it. So, one of the things we've talked about is knowing your customer. There's, this whole discussion globally about implementation of the travel rule, right? How are any of your services dealing with helping your clients satisfy travel rule requirements?
Doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, it doesn't apply to you, I guess. Yeah. I mean, you're not directly implementing the travel rule, but how do your products or analytics help?
I'm happy to take a stab at it. So, so travel rule, maybe for the benefit of those who are not so familiar for the travel rule. So the travel rule is a new requirement that the Financial Action Task Force came up with in 2019. And basically what they're trying to do is to implement the SWIFT equivalent onto the virtual asset space, right? And so under the travel rule, basically the requirement is if you have two VAS, right, let's call it Exchange A and Exchange B, and they're transacting with one another, there is a requirement between these two exchanges to also, at the point of transaction, share with each other information as to who the originator and beneficiary is, right? Which means that Exchange A, when it's sending funds to Exchange B, needs to tell Exchange B, this is my client in my exchange, and he's sending funds to your client in your exchange, right? And this information must be, transferred and stored by both parties.
Right. So it's done in the banking world, not traditional finance now. Right?
Exactly. Now, this obviously has caused a lot of issues in the blockchain space because, in the banking space where all transactions take place between financial institutions, that's not the case in crypto, right? A lot of transactions take place from private wallets to other private wallets. And in instances like that, how are you going to ask them to share information, right? Nobody controlling a private wallet is going to voluntarily, write into the exchange and say, hey, I'm sending money to you. This is my name, right? So there's a lot of issues around that. But how, Merkle Science is coming in to help is, well, one of the problems that our clients face is it's good to know that if I'm transacting with an exchange that I need to have this information shared. Question becomes, how do I know if the counterparty is an exchange? Right? Because when my client does a transaction, all they give me is a wallet, right? They don't give me any information aside from that. And that's where, Merkle Science attribution data set becomes very useful, because at the point where we do wallet monitoring for our clients, when we tell them all the risk associated, if we know it belongs to an exchange, we'll tell them that as well, right? So we can come in as an additional layer that, helps our client identify if the wallet that they're transacting with is an exchange, which then mandates them to comply with travel rule. And to take it one step further, because travel rule and blockchain monitoring goes hand in hand, we've actively been partnering with a number of different travel rule providers. So come November, most of our clients would be able to gain access to travel rule via our platform as well.
Right, and it's not just exchanges that the travel rule is going to apply to. It's there's a definition of what a virtual asset service provider is that people should go assess and see whether they may trigger that requirement. Let's talk about the difference between public chains, such as BSV, and permission ledgers. Are there differences in your capability to be able to do analytics or to investigate transaction activity on a public chain versus a permission ledger?
There are differences. There are challenges to it. People are working through that.
Which is easier?
Well, the public blockchains right now seem to me to, in my opinion, seem to give the most transparency.
Correct.
Easier is probably more for the tech folks who are working through this, which I'm obviously not one of those who are working through it. But we do have the challenges of the privacy coins as well. It's a major challenge that should be aware of. But the public blockchains, and building those, and a number of the companies, including us, building more and more of those public blockchains to have the maximum amount of transparency that we can provide to you as the user and to law enforcement who's looking into it.
Yeah. Shaun, thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's like looking at a password authenticated database versus a completely open database, right? So, I mean, is it easier to take a look at a database that doesn't require a password? No, of course, that's true, right? Because you can connect to it and you can run data analytics on there, perform various queries, and make different inferences and those kinds of things. But so of course that's going to be easier to analyze. But being able to look at other types of blockchains has always been a challenge. So I mean, maybe you have different types of vulnerabilities in the network, right? Maybe the network protocol needs to be analyzed, or those kinds of things to, gather different insights.
Richard, do you have any experience in the differences between investigating on public chains versus the permissioned ledgers?
No. The challenge for us would be more secure tokens and secure coins versus Bitcoin, something that's open.
Got it.
And it's not to say, I mean, it definitely does make it harder, but then we just got to get more creative on how we get from A to B and identify the person.
What's the strangest or most unusual blockchain-related investigation that you've had to work through?
Strange or unusual?
Anything that really surprised you?
No. I mean, the
You've seen it all by this
the strangest one I had was a cryptocurrency fraud. So, that doesn't pertain to the blockchain at all. So, the other ones are, I really can't talk about like how we get from A to B. So, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Are there things a blockchain ecosystem such as BSV, which is obviously very attuned to the need to ensure legal compliance as much as possible, things we can do in our applications or our even protocol elements that, for example, could have metadata that is embedded into transactions that could assist all of these processes? Do you have any suggestions for our companies?
I mean, as far as suggestions, it's all good stuff. What I used to come when I was assigned here in New York, I'd speak to the banks and try to get them to get all that information, right? So the more information that you collect and keep, we use data points in law enforcement. If it's a telephone number, an email, those are all data points that are going to get us somewhere. Yeah, some of these coins have challenges to them, but I think which Rich was alluding to. What we do is we come together. So DEA or IRS doesn't work in a silo, and I don't mean to speak because I'm not with the right. We don't work in a silo here. but law enforcement will work with each other. The state and locals will come and work with us, right? So we're going to bring some of the best and brightest minds to the table and work through these challenges, but we're going to get that bad guy, right? We're going to get the bad guy. But in the process of it, we're also going to be looking at platforms, just like we looked at banks back in the 2000s, right? We started looking at banks who were, I don't say involved, but their lack of watching out for things got them into trouble, and I spoke about that on Tuesday. Reputational damages, fines that they took there. So it's not just going to be this angle like we're looking at a bad guy, okay? And I know we have people from all over the world that are looking at this, but the one thing the U.S. has that a lot of countries don't have, in my experience, was always a shocker when, Rich, maybe when I arrested somebody who wasn't a U.S. citizen, was conspiracy. Was this notion to say, well, yeah, you may have never touched the drugs, but you laundered the money, or you coordinated the tractor trailer of drugs, right? And you could wrap them all up. So that's why I say this education piece and this knowledge piece, and just by being here and trying to understand this is a great step in building that into your platforms, into your policy, into your messaging.
Shaun?
I would say for the different money services businesses out there that use BSV, which is great, coming up with a universal subpoena response file would be awesome. So, I mean, when you subpoena, for example, Coinbase or some of the other exchanges out there, they all have a different response to that subpoena request. So maybe that'd be something great to work on with the foundation and be able to push out to the different providers.
What do you think would be elements that are helpful in a universal subpoena response?
Yeah, I would say, I think something that can be used via scripts, right? Normalized and then ingested very easily would be great to use in one of the tools here. That way you can analyze the transactional activity, for example, when you do identify a suspicious transaction. So I think that'd be great. But KYC information, and then let's say you're talking about an Excel workbook, for example, you might have one tab for deposit address information, and then you might have another tab that references withdrawals, right? And so you might have the transaction hash and then the output index number, for example. So being able to come up with some type of template would be incredibly helpful.
Okay. Ian, what advice would you give the businesses?
Well, first thing I want to say, if you're building on BSV, you're in good hands. Because one thing that I think the BSV does very well is, they always take efforts to proactively, look for ways to create a safer ecosystem, right? We've been in talks with BSV for a long time, developing and enhancing our systems to make it, customized for the BSV platform. So on that front, you guys are well covered. What I will say on the metadata
I'm glad
side,
to hear that.
What I will say on the metadata side, I think the challenge is not about what information you can put in, it's are people willing to put it inside.
Correct, yes.
Right? Because once it's in the blockchain, it is in this public domain and it's going to be there forever. Right? So yes, you can put in a lot of useful information, but it's information that you may not want to be, in this immutable public ledger. I'd say at the bare minimum, because, timely response, I think, is key to a lot of these cases. If, projects wanted to perhaps, include in the metadata that, they were part of that transaction, just so that, if something happens, an outsider can look in, quickly identify the organizations involved and, contact them, and then they can then provide, that private information that could be useful. I think that will go a long way because, today the issue is always, can you get in touch with the relevant parties? Can you identify them? Yeah.
Richard, are there types of information that digital asset businesses could collect, keep, or do better at that you wish you had sometimes when you're doing investigation?
Yeah, because most MSB businesses that I've been exposed to on the digital asset side, there's a certain amount of transactions you can do with no ID.
Right.
There's a certain amount you can do with a phone number, and then as it goes up, then you got to start providing ID. I think if we require that ID right up front, that cuts the transactions in half. And then you're dealing with the fake IDs, which
is why a lot of businesses don't want to do that because it impedes their user acquisition.
Right, and a lot of MSPs will tell you that, like, well, if I start asking for that, then I'm out of business. Right. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, but that's really what you want to see. You need ID, right, to be able to track and trace people.
Yeah. Well, it helps. You don't need it, but there's other ways.
Well, as we get to start wrapping up the session, I'll ask each of you, what are things you think the digital asset world, particularly the BSV blockchain ecosystem, can do to help win more confidence from the government agencies and the publics and the big businesses to know that we're doing the best we can to stop illicit activity on the blockchain? Because that's a reticence that a lot of governments and big businesses have when they're exploring use of blockchain. What more can we do?
Jimmy, well, I look at what the banks went through when they were hit late 90s, the 90s and 2000s. And there are a number of associations out there on money laundering that really talk to the banks. CAMS, if you heard of them, or CFE, a couple of these different ones. I think it's finding some of these companies that are doing training. It's looking at their training program and saying, so when you're talking to regulators, or if somebody does pay a visit, hey, we've taken this training, so at least we know here. To do things like that. Again, engaging your local community. I've encouraged counterparts from law enforcement to get involved with local blockchain associations and go to those meetings in those cities and to meet them. So, encourage them, invite them if you're part of that kind of association in your community, pull them in, have that dialogue. And I think that's what the banks learned along the way, and some of them, have benefited from that by not being fined, or at least, early on intervention, as opposed to, later on the government coming in.
Yeah, and I think that's counterintuitive for a lot of people in the blockchain digital asset world. Is like, I go talk to government representatives sooner, like now, right? Just make relationships with them. Because a lot of them don't like to talk to them.
Right. I mean, the FBI, DEA, and IRS, they all have someone like Rich. All you have to do is call that local office and go, hey, who's your Rich? Who's your cyber guy? And you're having these meetings, invite them down to come down there. Rich doesn't bite.
Yeah. Richard, what can we do to help win more confidence from government agencies?
On the blockchain side, like the bigger blockchain companies, I feel are becoming more responsible. Like the Coinbases of the world and everything, they're very responsible now. It's the smaller exchanges where, I think they're there for a reason. And I think on the banking side, they have to be educated to know who these companies are, because they'll get wire transfers from an unknown exchange, and they're just like, oh, well, we don't know what this money is, but they'll tell you about it. Well, they should know that this money coming in is weird, and then we can back into the exchange side of it. So education is probably on the banking side.
Ian, what about you, especially with an eye to the fact that the BSV world is going from this world of big transaction volume, especially micropayments and microtransactions? How may that affect all of these compliance initiatives?
So I think companies can do three things, right? The first thing is internally, right? Make sure that you have people who are trained in their role. And you'd be surprised the number of exchanges that we speak to, and we're like, can I speak to a chief compliance officer? And they say one of two things: either they don't have a chief compliance officer, or they refer me to somebody who's obviously never done compliance before.
Right.
I remember one of our clients, had a compliance officer whose only LinkedIn experience was flipping pancakes. Right, and yeah, he's compliance officer for an exchange. So number one, you need to be able to demonstrate to the regulators that you have a well-equipped team with the right credentials, right, who know how to implement compliance processes properly. You've done proper cybersecurity audits, right? And that leads me to the second thing that you can do: make sure that you are working with proper providers. I think the ecosystem has evolved to the point where not everything has to be done yourself, right? You can work with a reputable custodian provider. Right? You can use an external blockchain monitoring provider. You can make sure that your business is insured. Right? One of the things that we're doing is working as part of Lloyd's of London's accelerator to kind of make insurance more accessible for crypto companies. And I think that goes a long way to demonstrating to regulators we take things seriously. We're protecting our clients' assets. We're doing everything that we can. And then the last thing is proactively engage with the regulators. Don't be afraid of them. Right? They're not there to stop you from doing business. They're there to guide you to how to do business in a compliant manner, right? And oftentimes, they will give a lot of useful suggestions and help you structure the business in a way that you can go live in a safe and compliant manner.
Right, Shaun, we'll leave the final word with you.
I think everyone here stated it. Already. I think just awareness and education, and that pretty much wraps it up. But Ian, Richard, and Bill.
Yeah. My general advice is really, even though we've talked a lot about how exchanges, virtual asset service providers who meet that definition under the FATF travel rule, as well as other policies and regulations, clearly have to comply. I think all businesses that operate in the blockchain world, if you're receiving funds to a wallet address and sending out funds to wallet addresses, for example, to your users, you need to be thinking about these issues and taking maybe not all of these compliance efforts to ensure that you're not not being inadvertently drawn into illicit activity, but at least some of these initiatives. And so this is a panel of some great companies that are involved in that space, as well as Richard. So let's thank them for their insights and how we bring more light to the blockchain world. Thank you.